Hello and welcome to Falling Walls Conversations. I'm Charlotte Stoddart. I'm a science filmmaker and podcaster making content for Nature and other science magazines. And today I'm the moderator for this conversation with Maria Leptin. Before we speak to Maria, a few technical notes for those who have just joined us. You're invited to ask questions. We have 25 minutes and you can ask a question at any point during the conversation. If you have a question, use the raise hand button in Zoom to let us know. We will then spotlight you to let you know that you've been chosen to ask the next question, and then just wait until I let you know it's time to speak. If you have any technical difficulties, you can let us know in the chat section of Zoom and we'll try to help you. This conversation is being recorded and will be available afterwards on the Falling Walls website. So Maria, welcome. Thank you for talking to us today. Maria has just been made President of the European Research Council. Before that, she was Director of the European Molecular Biology Lab in Heidelberg, where she also led a research group, and the group studies the mechanics of shape determination in development. Before that, Maria also worked at the Laboratory of Molecular Biology and the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute in the UK. She was also for a while at the University of California, San Francisco in the US, and she's also worked at the École Normale Supérieure in France. So that's quite a long list of different institutions, Maria. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, about how the research culture was different in some of the different places that you've worked.
Well, actually, surprisingly, they were quite similar. So my whole career, you left out Basel, where I did my PhD at the Basel Institute for Immunology. I've always worked in places that cared about having individual people do original work with small groups. So in Basel, it was minimal. It was really one person, one technician, and loads of money. At the LMB in Cambridge, there were small groups. Max were, I think, 10 people. UCSF, small, etc. So you had people who worked with a small team and followed their own ideas. So very similar research cultures.
And I mentioned that you've just become President of the European Research Council. Could you first of all tell us what the European Research Council's role is, what it does?
It's to fund excellent, basic or frontier science. So it provides money for the best ideas proposed by the best people. It's very competitive. Unfortunately, we wish there was more money to fund more of those people, but that's the idea. And it's not restricted to natural science or science. It covers the whole range of human curiosity and cultural activities, and so all academic research.
And so I guess thinking so broadly will be a bit of a change for you, because you've come from the European Molecular Biology Lab.
Actually, organization. Lab is next door. We're the organization. Small detail. Yes, okay. I've come from molecular biology.
Yeah. And so is that something that you're looking forward to? Is that something that you think will be challenging in some ways?
I'm absolutely looking forward to it. It's one of the reasons this institution is so wonderful. And of course, I'm not an expert in all of those fields, nor am I an expert in all fields of the life sciences, and yet have been responsible for an organization that covers them all. But that doesn't matter, because there are experts. I'm not going to be dishing out the money. That's done by panels of, again, top-level experts, and they evaluate and judge. So I will have the pleasure and the luxury and the privilege to sit in on these meetings, on the assessment meetings, if I want, and so I'll learn. But I don't have to be expert in any of these fields. There are experts, so it's for me, that's just a pleasure and not threatening at all.
And in the coming year, what are the challenges that you're expecting to face in this new job, or what are the things that you're going to be thinking about?
You know, it's a fantastic organization with a super team, huge team it's a well-oiled machine with wonderful people running it. So I don't see any challenges there. really what I've got to do is protect that, protect the founding principles of the organization. So I wouldn't call it a challenge. Of course, there are opportunities. Every machine that runs well has to be kept oiled, and there's always things, ideas that come up, how you can improve, ways of looking at grants, ways of evaluating, asking whether every detail of the way the programs are administered serves the community best. So what I see as my role is to listen to the research community in all fields throughout Europe, listen to the politicians, what they think they want, what they actually want, seeing how these two can be brought together. So listening, communicating, and helping. That's what I see as my role.
And interacting with politicians, is that something that you did in your previous role as well?
You betcha. So my role as EMBO director was, in a way, similar. So we had our programs that we ran. Again, I was personally not involved ever in the selection of postdocs or young investigators or courses and workshops. That was, again, done by the experts from the community, so through peer review. But my role was to make sure that everything ran optimally and served the community, and to get the money. So EMBO is funded, unlike ERC, which is funded by the European Union. EMBO is funded directly by member states. And those member states, I had to report to them, every 5 years have to agree on the next 5-year budget. And it's the director who goes to them with an open hand and say, this is what I want. And so in that process, of course, I've learned to talk to politicians and, like I say, hear what they need and see how that fits with what we can do. And they have to hear what we want and see how they can find the money for us to do that.
And that sounds like a slightly different skill set to the skill set you presumably started out with in your career as a research scientist. So how did you make that transition from being the one who was in the lab doing the research to those leadership roles? I
have no idea. I really don't know. I never thought about it. I never thought about career steps. I don't think I have great skills as a scientist, but I think I share that property with many of my colleagues. I just see that others are doing it much better than I think I can do it. You learn, as you grow up, you have to take on duties at the university. I was managing director of our institute when I was professor in Cologne. So you just sort of grow into it. I didn't think about it very much. And same with EMBO, when this position came up, I wasn't sure at first. Nobody wants to go from research into administration. We don't think we want that. But it was a great organization, and so I accepted the role. And you just do it.
Do you miss being in the lab, being the one who's doing the research?
Yes, of course, of course. Doing it with your own hands is wonderful, but it's also very frustrating because experiments go wrong. Otherwise, they wouldn't be experiments. But sure, with the people in the lab, looking at new results, trying out things, suddenly seeing something that nobody's ever seen before, it's incredibly exciting. It also keeps you very grounded because what you're seeing is the real truth, not something somebody made up. So I miss that, yes. I still have my labs, and I do still work with my people in the labs. That's fine, but it's not sustainable forever, unfortunately.
I'll just take this opportunity to remind our audience that they can ask questions at any point using the raise hand function in Zoom. So let us know if you've got a question for Maria. Maria, I guess when you were a working scientist in the lab, you yourself submitted applications for grants for money for the lab. What was your experience of that process? And from that experience, are there things about that process that you would like to try to change?
Well, we all love to bitch about it. But most of my colleagues, and certainly I do, we also realize that it's if you don't have to do it too often and all the time, and if the grants aren't too small, it's actually very good to have to sit down and write down what you want to be doing and argue why it's important and figure out exactly how you're going to do it. So I think grant writing is an interesting intellectual activity. Of course, if you have to write grants all the time and they're for a year and a half and for one graduate student and no consumables, and you then have to write another one for consumables and yet another one for 3-year postdoc, then it begins to dominate and the paperwork becomes impossible. But that's one of the nice things about the ERC. You know, you get 5 years funding and lots of it. And, you know, the grants aren't that much larger. So you know, in principle, it's a good thing. In many countries and many funders give too small grants, and then it becomes an impossible burden.
But ideally, that process of writing the grant application can help you yourself to think through your research and perhaps improve the way that you do research.
Yes, and you know, for the larger grants, you actually, I do, but I think others do as well, involve their lab members. So it's actually a group exercise in thinking, and it involves everyone, and it's exciting. It's exciting to dream about what you might do for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to think about it. Is there advice that you would give, I don't know, someone who might be watching and who's going through the sort of grant writing process at the moment, perhaps feeling quite nervous about it?
Well, they should feel nervous. You know, it's nervous making, and you put your ideas out there and you will be criticized. You know, there's no way you're going to get all referees to say what a superstar you are. No, they like to nitpick. That's the way it is. You're not unique. I think the most important thing is not to pretend that you want to be doing something. For instance, you don't say, I want to cure cancer, if you're actually trying to find out something completely different, not completely different, but something that might sometime be used to cure cancer. Be truthful about why you're doing the research and what for. And don't say, I want to cure, if I just want to understand the mechanism, which is incredibly important. For all you know, it may do something completely different than cure cancer. So be truthful, be clear, and let your passion come across.
So the European Research Council is still very committed to funding that kind of very basic science, and it doesn't have to be all about meeting these grand global challenges.
No, you say it's still. It is still, and it will hopefully stay. That's what its role is, to fund the basic.
Great. And how about if there are scientists watching this who are thinking about maybe doing what you did and moving into more of a leadership role or a role where they'll think about science policy more? What advice would you give someone in that position?
Like I said, nobody should take career advice from me ever, because I've always ended up doing those things that I thought I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be a professor. My father was a professor. I did not want to be a professor. I became one. I didn't want to be an administrator. I became one. So don't take advice from me. The only advice I can give people is do what you enjoy doing. Put all your energy in there and do that well. If you enjoy it, and if you put all your energy in, then you will do it well, and something good will come of it for yourself or for others, but also for yourself. Why bother doing something that doesn't make you happy? You're not in it for the money in science, so you're only in it for what you enjoy doing. So do it.
Do you think that the priorities of the European Research Council will be affected by the sort of global situation at the moment? So I'm thinking about the focus that there's been on COVID-19 and the pandemic, and perhaps how that might have changed politicians' priorities. Do you think that would filter down to the European Research Council?
I think the opposite is true. I think what the pandemic has shown, it's completely vindicated the ERC approach of funding of funding basic research. Some 200 or so grants. We can find you some 200 grants that had implications and were useful for COVID research. Uhur Shaheen, whom we heard this morning, who made the vaccine, he's funded by the ERC for basic research. And of course, all of that is based on basic research. So I think the opposite is true. We've seen the value of having funded top-level people and given them the flexibility to pursue what they think is important at any given moment. And that's led to the success that brought us the vaccine.
And do you think that that is widely appreciated, or is actually communicating the way in which research councils have played a role in developing vaccines for the pandemic, for example? Do you think that's something that needs to be communicated better?
It has to be said again and again and again. But the nice thing is that politicians have actually recognized this. So that's been good. I mean, one doesn't want a silver lining of a disease that's killed many people, but that is really, it's good that people have seen that. I think it'll help us in the future.
And I'm interested in what it's like working in an organisation with so many member states, with so many people from different countries. I guess speaking different languages, coming with different cultural backgrounds. What's it like to work in a European organisation?
Well, very exciting. The sort of multicultural aspect of Europe is interesting and fun, and probably also helpful because different cultures do things differently, and that variety is probably helpful. I mean, that's something I'm really looking forward to finding out more. But that's one of the exciting things about Europe, isn't it? That we're so diverse.
Let's just check if there are any final questions from the audience before we finish. I think we have one, so if you'd like to go ahead and ask Maria now.
Hi, Maria. Thanks a lot for the conversation, and also congrats on your recent role change. I wanted to ask your opinion on interaction between science and politics, and if there should be any interaction at all, and if yes, then what's the best way to do that from your point of view?
That's an interesting question. I mean, my answer is an absolute yes. Politicians are there to hear their constituents' wishes, ideas. They represent us. We live in a democracy, and so they should hear what scientists want as well. Now, if you're asking me how directly to go about it, you have your in your own country, your local representatives. They will listen to you. They should, otherwise they're not good representatives. And the European Parliament, you have your members of Parliament. Talk to them. Write to them, talk to them, get engaged. Of course, scientists can also become involved in broader communication, to the citizens, to other colleagues, to outreach. I think all of these are great activities. And we had a session this morning about the problem that so many people don't understand how science functions and don't understand some of the benefits. In fact, they're scared of science. So anybody who helps there, I think, is wonderful.
Is that part of your new role at the European Research Council? Do you see that as part of your role to explain to the broader public how science functions?
I'd be happy to do that, but I don't think they'll listen to somebody explaining it top down. Those who don't trust science, why should they trust me? I think so. A good way of getting the science that's being done to the people is through the ERC grantees. And many of them, so that was Stefan who asked, many of them go out and talk about their work. So it's really good, but I think it has to, school children, I can't go to all school children in all countries in Europe. I don't speak all the languages. So it has to happen locally. And, yes, it would be great if we could do more to enable that. And we'll be looking at ways.
Thank you very much. I'll just check if there are any final questions from the audience. We have just a few minutes left, I think. No, I don't think so. So Maria, finally, before we finish, I guess I'm interested in whether how much you see the European Research Council's role as funding basic research, and how much you also play a role in communication, supporting communication and other activities around science.
Well, I mean, I think the main thing is to get this idea across. That the basic science is there and should be done for the sake of being done. But it's not as if we're forgetting that the science that is done can be applied. And so, there are other organizations, there are other agencies everywhere in Europe, in Brussels and in individual countries that do the application of that. In fact, the ERC itself has a grant called Proof of Concept, where people who have discovered something and are interested in developing it get money to do the first steps. And then there's the European Innovation Council. The function of that is to help people really develop and get to industrial or at least technical and practical applications. And I think it'll be important that we work with them. The ERC research produces all the stuff that can be used by others. And so I'm very happy to enable translation where there is scope for translation. People shouldn't be forced to, but some want to. And to enable that, I think, is another important function.
Thank you very much, Maria. And we'll hopefully hear a bit more about the European Innovation Council, which is new, this afternoon when we talk to Mark Ferguson. So that's all we've got time for with Maria. Thank you for joining us. And we'll have another conversation starting in 5 minutes' time. So if you'd like to join that, you can stay on the Zoom. And we'll take a short break now.